Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Somerford Associates Technical Podcast. Today's session is about observability, so both depth and breadth across the full stack, and the benefits of operating your tool sets together. I'm joined by a representative from two of Somerford's partners, from HashiCorp and from Splunk, to help us explore this. So if you are in a cloud environment or a hybrid and are working out how to gain visibility across your infrastructure and apps, from code to cloud, this podcast is for you. So after introductions with John Boero from HashiCorp and Chris Riley from Splunk, we'll go through the code to cloud journey bit and observability suite, and the challenges of visibility. We'll then focus on how HashiCorp products help with this, what Splunk adds to this, and also where Somerford Associates fits in too. And to finish, now I've got the experts in the room, I like to ask them what they think is the next big thing. So heads up, Chris, heads up, John. That question's going to come at the end. And so it's to beware. And as usual, you can contact me or my colleagues at Somerford Associates if you want any follow-up after this. So let's get cracking. Welcome, guys.
Yes, hello, Anne. Thank you.
So let's start with John. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm John Boero. I am with HashiCorp now just over 3 years. I come from Chicago, but I live south of London, south of Wimbledon. And I've been, in my mind, enjoying the best job at HashiCorp, enabling the partners across EMEA and having a good time along the way.
Thank you, John. And Chris?
Yeah, hello. My name is Chris Riley. So I am a Splunker as a part of the advisory and research group, or I think maybe we're called technical advisory now. I don't know. It changes sometimes. I refer to myself as a bad coder turned advocate. So I found out very quickly in my software development career that I wasn't the best developer, but I really enjoyed talking about it. So I spend my time aligning what the unicorns are doing with what the tech-enabled enterprises are doing and helping them on that journey.
Kind of a rare skill set where you can talk about technology as well as kind of do technology, however badly you coded. I'm sure you agree.
There's a Venn diagram there somewhere, and I'm an uncomfortable mix of the two. But yeah, absolutely. I love to code, but if I were a full-time coder, I wouldn't be able to talk to people sometimes. So I'm you got to straddle those jobs.
Yeah, it's a different brain activity, isn't it? You sort of funnel yourself in rather than out. Yeah, it's cool. Okay, well, lovely to meet you both. Let's start really with the challenge of observability. So what are we talking about? And this is a question to Chris, I think, first. What are we trying to observe? What are we saying?
Yeah. Well, so I to do justice to this question, I have to take a little bit of a step back because, as you know, our industry, all industries, this is true, but in particular, I think in tech, we kind of weaponize terminology to the point where, for some of the terminology, you have to be in the members only club to know what you're even talking about. And this is true with the observability, because if you're in the club, you don't even say observability. You call it Ollie or Oli or O11Y, and people who can benefit from it have no clue what you're talking about. So there are some different perspectives, and I'll give you kind of Splunk's perspective on what observability is, because I think it's not controversial, but it takes it to a broader level, which is going beyond the data. A lot of people refer to observability as the data, namely traces and spans. The way we look at observability as a new way to have a conversation about monitoring, because modern applications have unique challenges. Those challenges are distributed, microservices, finding the relationship between services is complicated. The tech stack, you can't rely on that one server that you restart every 2 weeks. It's much more complicated than that. You have to go all the way up to the front end. So I guess you could call it a practice. We look at it more as a collection of practices and strategies that build into technical capabilities, where I think a lot of people refer to it specifically as traces and spans and microservices. And so what are we trying to do? We're trying to solve the problem that we've been trying to solve all along, which is, how do we make sure that we can triage and troubleshoot issues in production faster? And that requires better context. It requires a way to get to the actual issue faster, because in modern applications, you can't go straight to the log. You need to start somewhere else. The platform needs to highlight issues for you. So you start looking at things like service maps, et cetera. So that's really what I think the observability is.
That makes sense. And what's about from HashiCorp's perspective, John? How do you and your products fit into that observability picture?
Well, we have two types of products, so to speak. We have tools and services, right? I mean, a lot of people are familiar with our Terraform product. Terraform is a tool that will let you customize some brief code to deploy something in the cloud. You could be sitting on your MacBook in a coffee shop and blow through $10,000 of your company's budget in an hour if you're not careful, right? So one thing is to have a tool. Another thing is to have limitations on that tool and have that centralized. And a lot of people will find our enterprise offerings around that being a way to centralize that, make sure that one person can't just go off and ad hoc do whatever they want with your cloud credentials. So we are able to produce that data. We're able to again, integrate with the likes of Splunk, and a lot of people will say, well, HashiCorp products tend to produce a lot of data, but we're not in the business of analyzing that, and that's where the great overlap occurs. So if you, again, like Chris was saying, if you have to troubleshoot something that's wrong or troubleshoot a Terraform error, you're able to create alerts and warnings about things that we don't analyze, we just produce.
Yeah, so where HashiCorp ends and Splunk begins is at that kind of analytical stage where you get the audit, and then Splunk does the so what bit.
Absolutely.
That makes sense. Okay, so the main challenge that people are kind of coming across then is in this new environment of cloud and hybrid and all the ways that we're doing things now, distributed little clusters. It's about automating that and having visibility over whatever you've just automated. So HashiCorp does the automating bit too, doesn't it?
Yes. So now we talked about Terraform, I guess, and Terraform again is one of the tools based on your code. But we also have other products, like I said, that are traditional services. So Vault is our number 2, probably by market share and interest. And we have Consul and Nomad as well that are traditional services that you might have deployed in 10 different places around your estate, right? And again, Vault is happy to act as almost a DHCP server for your secrets from a security standpoint. I need a database credential good for one day. Maybe I'm a contractor and I'm a person that logs in with my Active Directory credentials or some enterprise credential system. And then I use that to obtain a short-term lease on a credential to, again, database secrets or generated TLS certificates or SSH certificates. And then after that time, or if I am prematurely out the door, Vault will purge those. We'll decide, okay, this is no longer needed, just like a stale IP lease in a DHCP service. Now, again, we're happy to generate all that kind of data and have a full audit trail. But if something happens that you're not comfortable with, or something happens that you're disallowing by policy, we're happy to emit a warning. But how that gets handled is always relegated to external services. So the CM, and again, the data is key, but it's generated en masse, right? So you have to be able to analyze that in a way that's really helpful. And that goes for all of our products, right? We standardize our logging and all of our stack in that sense. So.
And then you've decided you're going to specialize, and are you going to, well, not specialize, but send the rest to Splunk, say.
Yes.
So Chris, what do you do then when you've got that, that bits of data?
Well, I will vouch for the standardization. Of course, I am playing favorites a little bit, but in terms of some of the integrations we have, the in particular, the Terraform one with Splunk Core is one of my favorites. But so I like to think of the tool chain. It's all the tool chains, your Hashi tools and your CI/CD tools and so forth. I like to think of it as an application. And this goes back to my definition of observability, is if you think of your software delivery chain and the tools in those chains as an application, then you need to do all the same things you do for your applications in production for those tools as well.
So the application's job is to produce code.
Right. It's to ship code. It is your factory, your software factory. And if you're automating and you're using Terraform providers and HashiVault and so forth, all of these are just features as a part of your SDLC. So when you treat it like that, you can imagine a scenario where I can't get a secret, for example. That's a problem. And there's various reasons why that may happen, or your lease expired and you're trying to use it and you're running into issues. These are monitoring problems. These are observability problems. And so what's so great about working with Splunk as the visibility partner across, and you said code to cloud, across your entire delivery chain, from feature definition to that feature running in production and back again, because we often neglect the feedback loop, then you get to assimilate all of these great tools and have the visibility that paves the path such that you can treat it as an application. So if something goes down, you can respond to it. You can actually build an incident response strategy around HashiVault. That's a thing. And especially when we start to talk about, recent scenarios like SolarWinds and, some of the DevSecOps stuff, it's a must. It's a foundation to have this level of visibility.
That's great. So that pipeline from backlog, developing code, testing those integrations, CI/CD, getting into production, and then even like when it's in production, doing incident response.
Yeah. And so again, and you said it in the intro, depth and breadth. So your breadth is your delivery chain. Your depth is making sure that from infrastructure, bare metal, all the way up to the front end, you are aligning monitoring with your tech stack. What's great is that we're very used to talking about our tech stack as developers and what we use in our stack, but we don't often make the correlation between how do we monitor at each layer and how do all those layers relate together. And that's where, we look at observability as a collection of those capabilities, and your visibility partner, hopefully Splunk, is going to make sure that you have those capabilities at each layer of the tech stack and the action, because what's the point of the data if you can't do something with it? And so that's where incident response comes in, is the mobilization, the context, the intelligence around getting to the right person at the right time with the right data.
Yeah. And what I like about both Splunk and HashiCorp is that you think quite widely and agnostically. It can be on AWS or it can be GCP. It's just data to everything, really. And HashiCorp, you can automate up to any of them as well, can't you? So it's all very.
I think you get bonus points for using the data to everything tagline.
Do I? Amazing. I should have just did a little hashtag
I didn't
myself.
tell you to do that.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. But it's a good way to actually coin it. I wasn't really. Yeah, that's brilliant. So we're looking at your definition of observability is a little bit wider than perhaps, I guess, other places or other people they may have vendors people may have talked to. It's going across that breadth all the way through that pipeline. And actually, some people might not be producing code, so they will have a different kind of pipeline to go across, right? And then also depth down from metal all the way up to cloud things. And then there's incident as well. So, sorry, John, were you about to say something?
No, go ahead. The thread is gone now. You were discussing now any of the cloud providers, and I was going to mention that even secure bunkers, right? Even in private data centers, we have things happening that will amaze me, actually. I always love when I hear from one of our public sector sales team about an opportunity, and like, what? I've never heard of anybody using that product for that before, but that's brilliant. Let's do it. Yeah, it is interesting once you put a community project out there, especially with open source, what the community will do with it and what they'll come to you for feature requests. So absolutely.
Yeah, HashiCorp, you're just like the best at, well, maybe Red Hat's pretty good too, but the whole idea of open source just driving all of those innovations, and then
absolutely. And I did I did 4 years at Red Hat and loved it. And I think that they proved the model that open source can work for everyone, which is really interesting. Yeah.
So do you either of you have an example of Splunk and HashiCorp working well on a client site together?
I do. Yeah, I actually have a lot of really interesting examples, and actually one that we didn't even talk about, which is actually using Terraform providers to provision Splunk services, which is really interesting with our on-call product. If you're a large tech-enabled enterprise and you're building kind of a de facto template for on-call, and you need to onboard responders, you can actually use Terraform providers to do that, as well as a part of the observability suite. So that's fun. We had one really large customer just provision a crazy number of users with that method. But the other one is to the on HashiVault and our integration there, and customers being very deliberate about monitoring their vault, including we do the same thing inside of Splunk, because it's your secrets management tool. I mean, that's like one of the last things you want something to go wrong with. But not only that, it's good to understand as a point of like a business metric of how secrets are being used and how you can leverage data to improve the efficiencies and the threat landscape of your environments.
What sort of bits would you be monitoring off Vault?
So, for example, are people generating secrets for root policy? Like,
okay. Yeah.
Probably shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah. That's a good alert. What about you, John? What were you about to say?
I was going to say, one of the layers we have, at least on the enterprise side, is the sentinel bits, right? So we have a governance policy as code engine to say exactly that. Like it's a policy that nobody's allowed to create root credentials, or even more detailed, nobody's allowed to do certain things in a production environment without approvals. And in fact, this is a great example where things have changed in 2020, right? We have a team at a financial institution where there's 6 members sitting at the desks right next to each other. One needs production access to an SSH server on a machine. That's the only way to get in. And the only way to get in is a 1-hour SSH certificate generated by Vault, good for 1 hour, requiring the approval of 2 of their teammates. And when they're in the desks, they can say, oh, yeah, hey, John, hey, Tom, can I get an approval on this? And obviously, when everybody's remote, you don't necessarily see that. So to have some data platform that's actually watching for those kinds of things and flagging it up as, hey, your teammate requested a critical credential is really useful in a remote world, right? Because everybody's going to be working remotely for, I don't know how much longer, hopefully not too much longer, but
like
it had to adapt.
Yeah. So that's really great. So that's Vault and Splunk working super well together. And also we've talked about the Terraform one. Have you got any other examples for the Terraform?
I will have, again, the Sentinel side, so we can actually prevent people from doing certain things. We can do a warning such that it can be bypassed by a manager or admin, and we have advisory, right? So yes, someone made a change to a production instance on a weekend. That's pretty critical. That's outside of business hours. I'm going to want to stop that. Somebody exceeded a budget, maybe deployed a Terraform plan that's going to use $1,000 a month in dev. That's informational. Maybe I'm going to let that slide. But again, we generate these events, and nobody's going to get them if they don't have visibility, if they don't have something that's directing them or putting together their focus points, right? And really filtering out, like Chris says, that observability of that. So otherwise, it's just one big fire hose of information. So we do have that, yes.
Actually, we've just talked quite a lot about alerts and events as the data sources for the observer for Splunk. What other things are we looking at in the observability suite?
Well, in modern applications, even latency is the equivalent of down. Right? Your users are very demanding. I have 2 examples in the last year where I have unsubscribed from web-based services who had superior content. So one of them was a virtual learning platform. One of them was a fitness platform. I would say the fitness platform content was on par. The learning content was probably the best, but due to latency and responsiveness of the application, I unsubscribed. And that's amazing. I mean, even knowing from my perspective, because techies can tend to look at applications and kind of understand how capable the engineering team is behind those applications. And so it's not just about when something breaks. It's about the latency between services. There's this concept of contract testing. The contracts, how well is one service satisfying the contracts of other services in the microservices-based environment? Understanding things that look like they're about, bad stuff is about to happen. So there's bigger lessons there, but also just making sure that the quality of the application delivers on what's promised beyond just being up or down.
Yeah. And is that APM then, application performance monitoring, or is it?
It's a combination of, well, I would include in there also synthetics and real user monitoring as well.
Oh, we're getting so demanding though, aren't we, as users? And
we are. That's okay. It pushes the needle.
I mean, it's good. It does mean that we innovate as well. So
I think Google did research on this, and I forget how many seconds they studied that if somebody hasn't seen a page finish loading, they're already onto something else. Like, yeah, you have to be that sub-second refresh, or else you're losing interest. Which is a sad state of society, I guess, but it's truth. Yeah, microseconds matter.
Okay, so we've done a couple of examples, and we've talked about how the observability is important and what HashiCorp sort of produces on which we can observe. That's not a great sentence. So have we gone enough into how HashiCorp helps with observability? Are you happy with that depth that we've gone into?
We have. And if you're talking about the future, well, I know you mentioned in the future what we think is big in the future. In the short term, I think the future of HashiCorp and Splunk, I would like to see the same kind of integrations happen in our console and potentially even Nomad orchestrators as well, right? Because console is already doing service discovery for some of the biggest CDNs in the world, Cloudflare among them. And the same thing, we kind of monitor tomography. We've got ping time across all your service endpoints, but we don't have that presented in a central data analysis platform as well. So Splunk, I suppose, would be a good fit for that too.
Yeah, that's great. And so, have we gone in enough into what Splunk adds into the observability problem for people? Where your value?
Yeah, I think that the punchline is really going to be around our observability cloud, because I think that our approach with our technical capabilities is such that we support enterprises both from a strategic perspective and from a product perspective. We all know that companies are guilty of thinking that the product is going to change the organization and expecting a magic bullet. And if you're not set up correctly with automation, visibility, whatever it is, you're not going to get there. And so by having observability be a set of practices and tooling and technology aligned with those practices, then it's exciting that Splunk can be that partner. It doesn't matter where you start today. If it's the bunker and you are air gapped and you don't have access to the internet, to hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and then full 100% cloud native workloads, we can be the visibility partner.
It is really good. And that's kind of where Somerford fits in. Well, Somerford fits in between HashiCorp and Splunk as the value add reseller in the middle. Somerford's value add bit is our engineering experts for implementation and support, our security clearance, training, thought leadership, and support services, so on. So an example, let me see. We've recently worked with one of our clients, a large UK financial institution. They use Splunk Enterprise Security as their SIEM and also have HashiCorp Vault, mostly as a KV store, I think. So as part of the larger project, actually doing playbooks for them and tuning their SIEM, we set up alerting from Vault into Splunk. Actually, interestingly, this brings us in another partner of our AWS. I could have had a third guest here, but I'm glad I didn't. So AWS is also closely related to HashiCorp and Splunk. And for this financial institution, their estate was on AWS as well as on-prem, and I think another cloud provider too. So the security alerting from the AWS Security Center, we fed into Splunk so that the SIEM works as a single pane of glass. And also, HashiCorp, Splunk, and Somerford's professional services can be bought on AWS Marketplace, which helps our clients really streamline their procurement and also do clever things with their budgets. So this is where Somerford help fit in between different vendors and sort of glue in the middle, I could say. What next then? So I'm talking about, yay, I've got some experts online. Looking maybe a couple of years down, 5 years. 5 years is eons in technology. So let's do a couple of years. Where do you see us going?
So from a HashiCorp standpoint, we're, I think, seeing quite a bit more of managed service options around our existing products. We're seeing a few new products. Vault and Console have always been good at connecting applications. They've not been as successful connecting people, right? And layer 8 is always going to be that furthest step. So we have Boundary now, which is our new cloud-oriented access management, identity access management tool. It is essentially like a modern take on PAM, right? Where we've had customers say, yes, I need an audit trail. I need a recorded session of an SSH into production machine. Vault has always been happy to get you that credential, but it's never been able to limit what you can control or do. And also, it's never been able to do that session recording. So now Boundary is that further step to say you can connect a database connection or SSH or some application TCP connection that is fully transparent, fully audited, and fully limited by the application itself. And it can do so in a way that, you're not giving it an IP, because IPs are really, I hate to say, they're almost legacy at this point, right? In the cloud, where an IP address can change every hour, you have to anticipate that something dynamic is going to occur, and you can't rely on the same IP. So all of the HashiCorp products are service first. They tend to, again, anticipate a flexible or fluid IP or fluid environment. And eventually, who knows what that will come to. And if I step outside of the HashiCorp box and I think about the greater industry, I'm looking forward to the quantum world. I mean, the networking world is actually, if we talk about zero trust networking again, and the fact that you can't trust any connection anymore. You can't trust your single cable going between your data center, which was usually traditionally trusted. That doesn't protect you from an inside attack, right? So on the networking standpoint, we're going to assume that every connection cannot be trusted. We're going to have to use service mesh, which Console is doing really well. And in the compute side, and even more interesting in the ML, machine learning and AI side, I'm really looking forward to what the industry has around quantum. That's not to say HashiCorp has anything in roadmap around quantum. I would love to see that brief come through, but no, it's too far away.
This is not product launches. This is just industry experts. So essentially, we're going towards more connectivity with people, PAM side style things, and then zero trust in the network area. And who knows what we'll do with AI ML. Why quantum? Sorry, I hear quantum, I think of bosons and electrons.
Exactly. Well, yeah, close enough, right? I mean, it's all the same principle of you go away from binary as being the basis of a computer. If you have a 1 or a 0, that's great. But if you have something that can be both, and essentially you have the big fear among cryptocurrencies, cryptocurrencies. The big fear among cryptography is that if quantum can trace all paths of a maze at once and is ambiguous, you can essentially have one key that can open all possible locks at the same time. So, all of the crypto ciphers that are used by Vault today are considered secure by the industry, but technology has a way of catching up to that, right? And that's one of the reasons that we believe in short-lived credentials for everything, right? And especially in the case of Splunk, again, if I talk about some application that was deployed using a credential with Vault, the traditional way people do that now, a DBA may create a password, put it in application, and then away it goes. If somebody comes across that leaked in a log or leaked inside Splunk at a later date, and that's still active, that's compromised, right? Or should be considered compromised. Vault has that special ability to say, okay, use a credential, rotate it every day or every window that you choose, which helps if anybody accidentally leaks a credential into your Splunk data, that it's invalidated by the time it's used. And then eventually cryptography and quantum computing is going to make that window even smaller, right? Because potentially we have the ability to break these ciphers in record time. So I'm really interested to see not just I guess not just the ML side of that, but the security and the crypto side, because who knows what could happen. It'll be really interesting.
That's so exciting. That's opened my mind massively. Oh dear, Chris, how are you going to follow that?
I'm going to take a radically different approach. I'm going to go super boring, even though I can nerd out on quantum and all of that stuff. One of the things that I focused on in my education was genetic algorithms, and we did a lot of fun stuff with cryptography. You're right, you can't say crypto anymore. But I'm gonna go very practical, talking about the next 2 years. I mean, I know AI ops is thrown around a lot, and yeah, there's absolutely ML capabilities that we use a lot of, like in incident response for recommended responders, similar incidents, making your first response to an incident a script, some intelligence to auto remediation and self-healing, but there's certainly like a person in the middle aspect of that, and I'm not expecting magic to happen. I'm more I talk a lot about DevOps being largely boring these days, and conversations about DevOps being largely focused on very real problems. And the two problems that I see that companies are not ignoring, but kind of we'll deal with that later, is what I think is going to be dealt with in the next 2 years. And that's pipeline analytics. How do you measure the success of your delivery chain? And operational drift, which is actually a place where Terraform comes in a huge, huge way. But configuration drift, operational drift, whatever you want to call it, is a silent killer for a lot of environments, very dangerous. And then finally, another problem, which we see with our customers all the time, we are guilty of using this term called GDI, getting data in. The quality of the data and the structure of the data you get into your management plane, which is all your monitoring tools, everything you use to maintain the uptime of your environment, is absolute critical to the success of how you use that. And so we've invested very heavily in open telemetry as a way to kind of standardize and democratize how you deploy and collect this data, so that your agents, for example, do not become the determining factor of your observability practice, which it is in many environments, because proprietary agents lock you into a corner, very hard to scale. You have Snowflake configurations based on the agents that you're using. And so we're very committed to open telemetry, and I'm optimistic that companies are going to get better at the quality of the data they get into their observability platform.
That's really interesting you say that. Somebody asked me recently about GPT-3, which is the AI algorithm, so to speak, learning training model by Elon Musk. And they're saying that, you imagine a digital assistant like Alexa that writes your code for you. Like, I don't have to go and click in a UI to get what I want anymore. I just describe it in a sentence, and then this AI will write whatever I need in whatever language I need. That's the kind of future that they're looking at, which blows my mind. I can't even think that far ahead. But yeah, wow.
That was exciting, guys. Thank you. I'm looking forward to, well, I would really like great data across everything with that you mentioned, Chris, because rubbish data in, you get rubbish decisions out, obviously. And anything that kind of standardizes or democratizes that would certainly help the customer, put them first, rather than like the vendors or other places. Brilliant. Okay, guys. Well, thank you. My mind is slightly blown. Maybe we should do a whole kind of whole session on genetic and quantum.
That would be a blast. Because so John, what you were talking about with my last project at Regis University was actually using NLP as a model to build applications. That was extremely limited, but the capabilities are certainly getting there. So yes, that is a huge topic.
Absolutely.
It was lovely to speak to you. Thank you both. John Boero from HashiCorp, Chris Riley from Splunk. So we went through the practice of observability and think of it as a practice rather than just a tool. Some benefits of focusing on this integrated tool chain. We talked about using Somerford Associates to help bring some of you guys vendors together, and how HashiCorp helps generate all of that automation and the information, the security inside the cloud model. But I suppose to sum it up, you guys are suggesting to do everything by code and make it visible, basically. Could have done it
even better. Make the important parts visible and forget the trash.
Forget the rubbish bits. Even better. Thank you. Yeah. So for listeners, feel free to reach out. I can put you in touch with these gentlemen from HashiCorp or Splunk, or one of our technical consultants too, if any of these challenges chime with you. So I'm Anne. I'll see you next time on the Somerford Associates Technical Podcast. Thank you, guys.